What's up, guys? This is Tygerz, also known. This is Tygerz Music, and today I'm going to be breaking down my song I Need You Now from my new album Endeavors. And let's see, to start off, I think I'm going to start with the drums. Oh, and just be warned, I'm having technical difficulties with my microphone. As you can see, it's only recording on the left side here. I've been trying to figure out, I cannot figure out why it's doing that right now. So just got to bear with me, guys. The mic's going to be coming from the left, but the rest of the audio is normal. So anyway, as far as the drums go, let's check this out, what's going on here. Okay, so for this, I actually am just using a reverse crash into this little Cashmere ethnic drum loop, which sounds like this. I don't really like this loop because it's got always little tiny percussive transient elements in here. They just kind of fill in the space, and that's little tiny bits of reverb. Really nice. Next thing I have is just a snap, little finger snap sound from Sniperz. Why is the other thing playing too? There we go. Simple little snap. That is playing not on the 3, but actually right between the down and the upbeat right here, between the 2 and the 3. So kind of like the snap kind of hits right before this little snare hit here on the drum loop. Moving on, we have a reverse crash into a crash, and then usually when I like to do that, just to make it sound a little more, to make my other crash, like this forward crash here, sound a little bigger, my reverse crash actually kind of turned the volume down slightly. So as you can see here, my reverse crash, this channel here. Another thing I'll do too is I'll pan it. So cymbals specifically, you don't really need them all center in the spectrum, so panning them creates more width in your mix. So when that hits, there's a kick drum. Something I did with my kick drum is you don't really need much of anything on your kicks besides maybe an EQ or a filter if you're gonna filter it out. But as far as this kick is concerned, though, all I really do is kind of just slightly high pass the really low lows in this fucking kick, and just ever so slightly a 4 dB boost on the at around 60 hertz, and another boost here with a wider Q at 888 hertz. What that does essentially is, when it comes down to mixing with your kick and your sub, there's less frequencies fighting for space or fighting for room in your mix. I don't know if you guys have any kind of speakers or headphones that let you hear sub, but this sounds a little cleaner than that. And as well as having this EQ right there, this specific EQ in this little section here, can actually make your kick a little tighter sounding just on its own. So that's a little added benefit right there. So moving on. So again, still the same method drum loop here, still the same snaps going on, only now I just added some claps. Some simple claps, did nothing to them, just had to turn the volume down, and a little tambourine sound I got from a Graves sample pack. you might notice a lot in my songs. I actually really love this fucking sample, and I use it a lot. I need to stop using it so much because it's getting a little annoying, even to me. But tambourines are just—they're cool. It's like a cool alternative to hi hats, in my opinion. And it's good for intros. It's good for bridges and breaks. Just good for a lot of things. Okay, so continuing on. So now the only thing I added here was just a snare. Again, did nothing to this snare besides turn it down. Okay, so I think right here. Okay, yeah, so here I actually just made notes with this snare like this, consolidated them, bounced it out, and then took that bounce and just pitched it up as it goes, just to add some more tension. So pitched up to 6 semitones as it's transitioning up here, and then these kicks here, but I don't want to flood it with low end right here with drums alone, so it goes just from these quarter notes to these eighth notes. Not in the same sense as these snares. And then one last thing I did here as well is I took my entire drum group here, added a filter, and all it's doing is just filtering out all the lows as it builds up. And the whole point of that is when everything else is building up with the drums, it's kind of quick. It's kind of easy and fast for your drums to flood everything else and drown things out when you got a lot of drums just building up like that. When you have a lot of fast drums just going nuts, it's too easy for everything else to kind of get drowned out in that. So what I did is I just kind of filtered out the lows in that, so that kind of avoids that happening. Alright, now for the drop. So for this song particularly, what I did was I actually kind of made two groups. There's the main drum group here, which is kind of encompasses all my drums. But then I have this little thing here called background, which is everything that does not include my kick, snare, and this fill for the drop. So turning off the background sounds, this is my drum for the drop. That's all it is. So let's talk about this. So the kick, same thing, nothing different. It's the same fucking kick from over here. However, these snares, this snare particularly, I abuse a lot as well, just like that tambourine sound. But really cool snare sound from Sniperz. And I just layered it on with this other Sniperz one here to get a little more depth. And actually, we can go ahead and take a look at how I mixed that. So this first snare has a really long tail, and it drags out all the way up to the next fucking snare, right? So you're gonna hear it from this kick. You're basically gonna hear from this kick, or from this snare all the way to the next snare as it's playing. And then because this snare isn't very crunchy, I guess you could say, I added this snare to layer with it just to give it a little more depth. And as far as the EQing goes for these snares, I actually kind of just put a hard high pass on both of them. This snare more than the other one, but basically what I did is I took a look at the spectrum of it. As you can see, it kind of hits harder right here around 440 hertz. So that's high pass at that point and called it a day. This snare, on the other hand, a little lower, about 400 hertz. So high pass around there, it's good to go. And then I got a clean kick snare mix. These fills here, where did these fills even come from? Oh, that's interesting. Check this out. Doesn't even come out around time. Okay, I'm not entirely sure where I got these drums for these fills, but they're pretty cool. Basically, all it is, I have this. I started off with this sample here. It might actually be longer. Nope. I started with this sample here, and then I just took this one sound and just duplicated it here. And then also for these ones particularly, just pitched it up by 2. Right here. As you can see, pitched it up 2. So when it comes over here, and that's it. Now the background sounds is going on during this. It's a little bit different story. It just kind of fills in the gaps that the kick and snare doesn't. It fills the void those two things don't do. So comes with a crash, and right as the snare hits, I brought some rides. Didn't think it would be this little trap snare here, playing on some upbeats. And not entirely sure why I did this. However, I took these rides and just kind of sped them up slightly for this note. You got here like dun dun. Dun dun. Alright. Okay, so hi-hats. Like I said earlier with the crashes, one thing you want to do is you want to pan your cymbals, right? Well, there's a little trick I like to do sometimes too. It's a little bit lazy, but it really can be useful and sound kind of cool when you do it right. But when you have you can call this a simple drum loop. You know, there's not a lot going on. It's a kick, snare, and a couple cymbals. That's not much. And so when you're doing that, you can get away with doing this little effect here. Of just panning your hi-hats left and right as the drum loop plays out. That's what I'm doing here. It's not very much. It's it's not drastic by any means. It just very little bit just bleeds back and forth left and right. And all I'm doing there is just using an effect here in Bitwig Studio called rotary, which is just an auto pan. It's an auto pan effect just like in Ableton. Nothing special there. So created my hi-hat loop. And this one here is exactly the same as duplicated it. Drums here for all this is literally just the same thing as here from the build up. In fact, this whole build section here is the exact same build up as right here, just copy and pasted. Okay, so that should be just about it for the drums. I don't think anything else really changes throughout the song as far as drums are concerned. But let's move on to the synths, or in the group that I called melody, which is basically everything except the drops. Okay, so I got this thing here. It says Cymatics. Basically all it is just a Cymatics vocal sample that I had, and I just kind of shortened up, EQ'd it, added some OTT. If you want to see this, go and take a look at that. How I did my OTT here. When a lot of times what I normally do is I kind of turn the timing up and turn the depth down. Sometimes I add some gain to it. It's really all I'll do. Just slight OTT. Too much can ruin a sample. Add some delay and some Valhalla room for reverb. Really awesome plugin. This is my favorite reverb ever. For the longest time I was kind of like, the reverb's a reverb. They all do the same thing. They definitely do not all do the same thing. I'll tell you right now. They're all pretty different. and a little filter effect for when I want to bring in this sound on its own. Let's see. Let's go to Harvard's. There we go. So makes for a cool little thing you use for melodies and for the leads. That's what I like to do in the drop here. I use this vocal sample chop that I made, and I actually kind of copy and paste this same track and use it in multiple tracks too. It's really cool sounding. I liked it. So let's go ahead and get into the track here. Okay, so when the song comes in right here,
to hold you off the ground where I'm fighting.
at this point now you're starting to hear this vocal loop starting to come in. You know, I'm filtering in with the cutoff filter, and you also hear this. This ARP, I believe I actually found it on Splice. I was kind of just browsing through there one day, looking at things that are in the same key as the track I'm working on, this track. And I was like, you know, this sounds pretty cool. Just threw it in there and it worked, and I was like, all right, cool. I just kind of stuck with it. But really, I didn't do anything to it. I don't think I didn't pitch it, nothing like that. Just added a little EQ, cut off high pass to lows, add some reverb, not a lot, and just that was it. It fit. And I bring in this other little vocal loop here, as this is also a splice sound thing. Added slight bit of compression here, just to kind of even out the transients. As you can see, they're a little weird, not drastic, but just a tiny bit. So just a tiny bit of compression fixed that problem for me. And 2 filters. As this comes in, I believe this is being filtered as well. Yep. Filtering it in. This is actually the sound we hear in the first track as well.
'Cause I need you now.
That little atmospheric vocal loop there is really cool sound to add on top of the chords when you don't specifically want to play a melody just yet. You can add little atmospheric sounds on top of your chords and just makes a really, really cool thing to do for a drop. Like, it's like, oh, this is a little different. This is cool sounding. Let's see. This serum bass. Did I make this sound? I might have. No. Okay. So this bass is just this little preset bass here, 3-on-3, and I'm not sure if I changed anything in settings. I might have changed some of the settings. I might have added a little tiny bit of release to it if I did anything, but basically I'm just playing a couple notes. Tension to my build up here, because there's not a lot going on besides some guitar plucks, some fucking arps, and that's it. There's no chords in the beginning of my song. There's no chords until the drop. So I added this bass here to make a little, add a little more tension. This sound. Okay, I take it back. I did add chords. That must be where these notes came. Okay, so these notes are essentially they're the same notes as I used in this. So for Spire, as you can see, it says it's Spire bounce. I don't know if it's just me, but when I'm trying to do things on Spire and I automate the cutoff in the actual Spire synth, it makes my CPU freaking it goes nuts. I don't know what it is. I can play with it while it's not like I'm playing with it, live, just messing around with the notes, move the cutoff, it's fine. But when I'm trying to render the automation for it, my CPU goes insane. So I created these notes and then bounced it out But I took those bass notes, and that's where these bass notes came from. Here, they're just following the same chords. Effects I most likely added this before I balanced it out was compression, high pass to lows, probably some delay and reverb as well. Maybe some really tiny amount of delay. For pluck chords, too much delay can make them sound really bad. And then let's see, so that is the synth build here. Actually, what that sounds like to me. Yep. So on my entire melody group section here, looks like I added some compression to the overall group, and I filtered out the lows as it builds up, just like they did with the drums. So as it's building up, alright, moving on. Here, just using that same vocal atmospheric effect. And then right here, I brought in my my little melody with the vocal chop sample. Why is it not playing? Oh, you know what? I think this is actually filtered right here. Yeah. Oh, this is pretty cool. So for the drums, when this part builds up, I have this really cool drum loop here for the fill. And this one I also added that same that same auto panning effect that I added the hi-hats, only this one's a bit more harsh. So it's transferring to left and right more than the hi-hats did, and faster as well. So I did that on purpose because right at this part here, that's the only thing playing. And so to make it sound interesting, as it's just some toms, you know, it's which is pretty cool. And then when this drop hits, and basically what I do when I'm coming up with my melodies here, when I color code my things, so I'll use this bright blue as kind of my main go-to color for all my synths. You know, I'll make my group blue, make everything else blue in there, but then I'll change the color of certain things in here, like this darker blue here, because this one is slightly different than this one. I'll duplicate the same, like say I'll duplicate this, and then I'll take this melody here, and I'll just change certain things. Like maybe I'll take this note, plug this here, and then this note will go there, you know. And then when I do that, I'll color code that one's a slightly different color. That way I know it's a different a different melody there. Same with this one. So all three of these here are different in their own way. Maybe not by much, but they're all slightly different. And you can even hear, so. Yeah. They're all slightly different. Which is cool, is it breaks up repetitiveness in your song. So melody, that actually covers all of the melody throughout the entire song, the whole melody section. Looking at it here, I don't see anything that is drastically different from this stuff here. Okay. Vocals, let's move on to vocals. So the vocal samples I used actually came up from Splice. Also, I'm kind of big on Splice. I sample things a lot. There's nothing wrong with sampling, and I made a whole video about that a while back. You can go back and look and see my thoughts on sampling. As long as you're not building an entire song around your samples, or your entire song from samples, then you're good. If you're still creating your own notes, you're creating your own chords, you're writing your own drums, then you're in the clear. You're fine. Royalty-free samples they're there for a reason. You can use them. Same with vocals. Like, I can name off a ton of songs that are really popular, and I've heard that same sample, or I might even have that same sample downloaded. But that's a different topic. So vocals, on the entire group track of my vocals, really hard, compress it in that way that every vocal is the same volume to start off with, unless I turn the volume on that track specifically down. EQing, high pass, and add some slight boosts here in the mid region, just where the vocals kind of needed it. Slightly, very, very slightly, was at 1 dB of bell on the highs, around 12 kHz. A little bit of delay and a little bit of reverb. And if you want to see the reverb, that's what I did. I wanted no high cut whatsoever, so I turned that all the way up. So actually, without all these turned on, here's what my vocals sound like.
Following the waves of your gold.
Actually, I think each one of these tracks, nope, maybe they don't.
Following the wave.
Alright, then with those turned on,
Following the waves of your gold.
yeah, makes it sound a lot better. So this little effect here, alright, so this track here is one of my main vocal tracks. Looks like this one and this top one here, these two. This guy, this track below it, that's slightly quieter in volume, is a fill, or like a vocal fill.
Of your gold.
And that one actually added a lot more reverb to it because I wanted it to sound more atmospheric as the vocals are playing. So that way, it's not up front, it's kind of in the background. So when you're listening to the whole song,
Waves of your gold. But
so as you can see, it's kind of in the background. You can reduce the volume with that by turning it down and adding some reverb, because reverb does lower your volume. This one here, actually, from the sample pack that I got this vocal from.
off the ground.
As you can hear, it's kind of hard to hear, but there is a small harmony in there. So this one varies from this one, because this one's just the vocal by itself. This one has a little tiny harmony in there.
Off the ground. We're on fire with this desire. Don't look down.
And this actually is the exact same as this I Need You Now.
But I need you now.
Kind of the same.
'Cause I need you now.
But instead of having it in the background this time, I brought it to the foreground as a like a backup vocal. Comes in during the build.
Don't look down. 'Cause I need you now. 'Cause I need you now.
Okay, so let's talk about this. This is cool. So what I did is I took the very first
You now.
now, which comes in on the downbeat right here, comes in on the 1.
Now.
So I took that now, I duplicated this guy a whole bunch of times, right? To not include this first now. So starting from here, duplicate those nows, and I did the same thing I did with the snares earlier, where I consolidated it, bounced it out, and then pitched it up as it's going through the build. Up 6 semitones. So let's take a listen to that.
Now, 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 now.
And then once the song kind of lets up right here, there's nothing else playing.
Now, 'Cause I need you now.
And this now right here, its own separate track. There's a bunch of delay I added to this one. That way, when the drop hits, it's kind of like now. You know, just it fades out into the drop.
'Cause I need you now.
I also intentionally made that hit on the one. So as soon as the song hits, like, I need you now.
'Cause I need you now.
So, vocals, that is really it. I did add this little guy here halfway through my drop, to kind of complement this fill that's going on here, and also just to let the listener know, like, hey, there's a transition right here. So what I did there is, when that fill comes in, this fill it's a bigger fill than this guy, and also it transfers into my hi-hats. So the second half of my drop is where the hi-hats are, and so to build in those hi-hats, I have this longer fill. I also have this vocal sample that comes in on, like, where she's singing at a higher octave. I need you now. They'll kind of complement each other. And then took the same I need you now here to end the drop as well. But this time, instead of having the fill end right at the end of the phrase, it ends sooner, and I use snares and kicks to create my own fill as the drop ends. The same buildup comes in from over here. Same buildup, same everything. Okay. So this part I get questions about quite a bit, is my guitar. So I have two guitar tracks here. I have one just labeled guitar and one's labeled distorted. The distorted one I use specifically for the little guitar solo I did in the drop, and then the regular one without distortion I use as my plucked chords, my arpeggioed chords, I guess you could say, throughout the song. You know, it's appearing quite a bit, and it's all the same thing. Basically, I just grabbed my guitar, plugged it in, recorded this little line here where I created a chord, like as you can see, I laid down a chord on my guitar and just started plucking at it instead of strumming it, just plucked it, which sounds like this. As you can see here, like, every one of these is entirely the same. But these ones are a little different because what I'll do is I double record. So I'll record it one time, stop, make a new track, record it again. These two recordings are exactly the same. So when I do that, it creates a more full sound, and it almost harmonizes with itself, even though it's in the same octave and the same notes and everything. So as you can hear, two of those sounds better than one. Sounds a lot better. Another thing I'll do too is when it comes to my guitars, I didn't do it for this track specifically, but a lot of times I'll take those two tracks and I'll pan them kind of hard because they're both the same thing. You can pan them all the way. I didn't do that for this song. I don't know if I have a reason for that. I might have just forgotten, to be honest. But that's what that is. And that also has a cutoff going through there, with the build up, just like everything else. But let's talk about the effects I use in here. So for this effects, I used some compression, attack release all the way down, brought the threshold down a little bit, and I didn't use the ratio all the way up like I did with my vocals. That's how I normally do it. Some dynamics here. These dynamics is essentially the side chaining effect that you can use for and when we're sidechaining things to kicks, snares. So sidechaining to my snares, I did not sidechain to my kick, but this kind of also adds as like a second compressor when you're not sidechaining it. EQing high pass hard as hell, and also raise up the mids. You know, guitar players, if you're not boosting your mids, are you even really a guitar player? This gating sound, there's gating effect. This gate doesn't really do much of anything. It really only helps me when I'm recording. Basically what it does is it kind of cuts out all the feedback. So when you have the recording armed and you're not playing anything, there's feedback going on, and that kind of kills that feedback for me. So the next two things here I have are free plugins actually, and these plugins are from the Le Poo, I think that's how you say it, collection of plugins. Yeah, always Lay things are here. So Lay 456, Lay Cab, Lecto, Legion, Lextac, and Nile Photo. But these things here, they're VST amps, and this cab is obviously a cab. But what they do is it's a virtual amp that I can use. So I run the guitar. Here, turn down the bass some more. Turn the mid a little bit. Turn up the treble slightly, and that's really all I did to this amp, or the amp. The cab, however, a little different. This cab, the way it works is it uses instances to virtualize a cab. And so what I have is I go through my file browser here into my impulses folder, and I have a whole bunch of folders here with all these different impulses. And basically what an impulse is like a half a second sound, and I don't know how it does it, but it takes that sound, it samples that sound into the cab and creates like a brand new cab out of that impulse sound. So I don't know how it does it, but it's pretty cool how it does it. And if I don't have the cab on, it still sounds like shit. The guitar by itself, without these effects, it's really boring sounding. So when you slam it through an amp and a cab, it makes it sound a lot more professional, I guess you could say. It makes it sound better though too. So that's playing through most of the song, plays through all my verses, through my builds, and near my outro as well.
Following the waves of your gold.
Okay, so the distorted sound here. I'm pretty sure I did absolutely nothing different besides add a virtual distortion pedal. So all this looks the same. Okay, the EQ is slightly different. I didn't boost the mids this time. And I think that's because, due to the fact that I also have my chords playing in the drop, and I didn't want those to clash too bad, because, yeah, I have some mids going on in those chords. But, also, yeah, right here I added my distortion pedal, which is a TSE 808. Basically brought the drive a little bit, brought the tone slightly, and turned the volume down a little bit because it's going to add some gain to it when you do that. That sounds a little different. I might have even turned my my reverb up a little more too. So to compare the reverbs, here's my distorted reverb right here, and my non-distorted reverb. Okay, yeah, never mind. I didn't change anything there. Same reverb. And so this little solo here, I'm basically just playing. I'm just strumming one note at a time. Like I said earlier, I always double record, so I recorded it whole through one time, record another time all the way through, and then each time I'm doing this as well. Looks like I didn't even do it for this song, but a lot of times I did. So I did it for these notes. Is I'll stretch everything into place, warp it all, because you can't. No one plays perfectly on time. And I wanted that like robotically perfect sound. So For the arpeggiated chords, I didn't do that. However, or I did do that, but however, for my solo, I didn't, which I probably should have, because you can even tell from looking at these samples that they're not perfectly in line with each other. You know, you look at the line here. This one is different from this one. But listening to it back now, let's check this out. Okay, so this part I did actually warp these into time, because this would have sounded really bad if I didn't. These notes are a little different. These notes I'm actually playing a more little intricate melody. So this is the melody here. But this note here actually ended it right before that same little vocal and fill break come in. So as that comes in, this last note is hitting at the same time. And that's all this sounds like together. That's really it for the guitar. Talk about the chords and the drop, because I know chords is always a big topic for everybody. So we'll start with the actual serum chords. So this is actually a preset that I made, and I might release this preset eventually, but if you want to copy it, go ahead. I'll leave this open for a second for people to copy. Actually, that's what envelope 2 does there. Okay, and my effects section here. Okay, so this chord, actually, any special EQing on it. And like I said in the last video when I made my chord tutorial, I like to make my notes for my chords in 16th notes like this. These are just 7th chords, nothing special. Regular 7th chords. So for this chord here, okay, yeah, so these chords are the same notes obviously. However, these top chords here are playing 1 octave higher than these chords down here. I did that on purpose to fill up the spectrum, like I said earlier in my other video. You want to fill up that whole spectrum. So when you're looking at an EQ, you know you're trying to fill this whole thing. So when you're, you know, it's. I cut the bass out because I have a sub playing. I don't need bass in my chords. But so these chords here, another little set of chords that I created here. LFO1, using a comb filter. The effects section here, and you can even hear slightly this hyperdimension. Kind of sounds like a phasing effect. So without that, you don't really hear the phasing effects. With you do kind of hear it, which it just creates a little bit more movement in your chords. But it's so slight and subtle that you almost wouldn't even know it's there. If I was not even have it on, you probably wouldn't even know. So this next chord track here, same chords, only just string sounds. And I think those string sounds came from, yeah, these came from a Sniperz pack also. It's just the fake strings too. Again, same notes. Does nothing special. No EQing, nothing. All my EQing was done in the actual group section for the chords here. So with that I have, why is this not being, this should have actually been set tuned to my kick, that must have got shut off somehow. But okay, so it's being side tuned to my kick, it's being side tuned to my snare. I got some compression going on, hard compression, just like I did with my my vocals, to make sure everything kind of levels out. Because I do have a lot for future bass chords, you know, they wobble, they're floaty sounding, and with that the volume is kind of being ducked a lot, and so I wanted to have that same ducking without losing my volume, so I put a compressor on my chord stack here. EQ'd out just the low subs here, added my filter effects so I can bring them in, bring them out when I don't want them. And I also add this LFO tool here. I don't think I did anything special to it. I'm pretty sure this is just the default setting for LFO tool. Being rated at the 1/4 LFO right here. And what that does is it adds more floatiness to my chords, because this drop isn't particularly like really in your face and crazy. It's more of a like a chill, slower thing. So without that LFO tool, so you can still hear it being ducked out by my kick and snare, but with the LFO tool on, you know, it kind of adds more of that feature bass sound to my chords. So altogether that is. Okay, so let's talk about this Gladiator setting here. This Gladiator, you know, lots of crazy EQing going here. I only wanted my highs. I didn't want no mids. I didn't want, you know, no lows. This Gladiator sounds really harsh, but basically all it is, I just kind of duplicated my chords here. I brought it into this Gladiator track, raised it up 1 octave, and just kept just the top notes, which sounds like this by itself. You can hear it's a really, really harsh sound, and all this sound is actually, if you have Tone 2 Gladiator, this sound is just the lead category, and it is Angry Saws. Really cool sound for using for your to layer onto your leads. Like if you want to just copy the lead line of your chords, really cool sound to layer on there. Just make sure it's, you don't want to be really all that loud, because it's gonna sound really bad if it's loud. As you can see, this sound is actually quieter than both the chords combined. And all it's really doing is adding a little more depth to the highs. This sound here, this is just a bass note, you know, a little gritty mid bass. Cut out all the lows, even some more into the mids, but because I don't want no trace of sub in there. And all I was doing is just playing the bass notes of the chords. So these notes down here. This sound did not create this sound. Actually, where did this come from? This is BA Drill from the Serum presets. And again, this little gritty bass sound here. This is kind of preference at this point. You can have it louder. It's not going to hurt it. I like having it. For this particular song, I didn't need the grittiness from the mid bass. This is how good this is. This is a Okay, so that's for the first drop, and for the second drop, it's the same chords. The only difference is I just kind of cut out some notes. So I took the chords and I was like, hey, I don't want that there, I don't want that there, you know, so on and so on. I just found what worked. So I took those, you know, just like I did with the melody. I did a slightly different color, so instead of bright purple, they're dark purple, and this is what these sound like. But I did these ones in this sections where they're at on purpose because I did it on snares. I did it where the snares, there's a double snare right here. I did it on the fills. It just sounds really cool together. So. That's a really cool effect. And that is it for the chords. Moving on to the sub. This sub, I'm not sure if I made this one or not. I might have made it a long time ago. I don't remember. But it's definitely not big EDM feature chords too. As you can see, this is 808, no type. All this is just an 808, like your typical 808 sub sound. So it's just an analog sine wave, a little bit of tag, a little bit of release, and there's nothing else to it. Maybe some distortion, I guess. But that's really all it is. So you don't need anything else other than that. But for this sub sound, compressor. So one thing with compressor, if you add compression to, especially this type of compression, when you add compression to a sub like that, you're actually going to lose that tail, and it's something that kind of bothers me sometimes because I was working on a song and then I didn't realize I had compressor on and I couldn't figure out why the hell the sub just kept dying. Because an 808 normally it's just like the boo. Well, this 808 was going beat, beat, and I couldn't figure out why the hell it was doing that. And it's because I had a compressor like this, and it just kept cutting it because there was no release added to it whatsoever. But all I did was just added this compressor, added some dynamics for side chaining to the kick. I did not add the LFO tool to this one because you don't need wobbly sub bass, not when you're using 808s. And added a peak limiter, just to kind of reduce it from clipping at one point in time. I probably don't even need this thing on anymore. But these sub notes are actually the same thing as my mid bass notes, only this time I took these notes and when I was editing them, I had them play only when the kick hit, which is something you should always be doing. Your sub, when you're using 808s, your 808 should always be hitting on the kick, you know. This one here, there's no sub note, which is fine. You don't need to have one on every single kick, but your sub shouldn't be playing right here because it's just coming out of nowhere is what it sounds like. Here, it would just sound really out of place. That's really all the sub is. Sub is really simple. And the very last thing is my effects section, which is comprised of a low pass or a high pass on the whole group. Nothing crazy, just the lows. It has, I don't even know what this even is. It sounds to me like it might have been one of the vocals that created like a small loop like this, copy it somewhere, and just added a bunch of reverb to it, reversed it. That's probably what this is. And obviously just added a fade. This track doesn't need to be here, there's nothing even on it. This is just the from the same vocal pack as the rest of these. Let's do it in my effects section because it's just a reverse effect. This here is a white noise riser into a white noise breakdown sample. Two slightly different effects here. This one's kind of more wobbly. This one's just a straight sound. And I think that's actually all my effects. Yeah. I just kind of copied and pasted in different spots where I wanted them at. For your effects, especially for your white noise, it's really easy for the white noise to drown things out. Just like too much drums playing at once can do. So what I do is I make my effects really quiet, especially when it comes to mastering too. Like, it's all highs. Most white noise effects are all highs. So when you go to master it, those transients are going to become really loud. It'll sound like shit fast. So you keep them kind of quiet, and I promise they will come back in your mastering stage to where they'll sound good. They'll sound crisp without being overpowering to everything else. So with all that put together, oh, I also do have this bigger downsweep here. I didn't affect its own EQ onto it because there's a lot of really high pitched highs right here. You can kind of see it as it goes. So I added a little EQing there, and it's the Sniperz riser as well. Into my build-up. That is it. So all together, this whole thing sounds like this.
Off the ground, we're on fire, but this desire don't look down. 'Cause I need you now. 'Cause I need you now. 'Cause I need you now. Cause I need you
So that concludes my breakdown of my song I Need You Now. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you learned something.